Doody, middle-aged American living in New Jersey near the Lincoln Tunnel. If you were to visit my website, you would type Howdy Doody into Google. You'll find the correct spelling of the famous puppet. You then combine Tom Doody in a Google search for my site. From the book Destiny of the Republic, Candice Millard, Madness, Medicine, the Murder of a President, President Garfield. Chapter 21, After All, page 222. Despite the prayers and tears and earnest pleading and piteous protest or hero's fall, despite the hopeful signs our hearts misleading, death cometh after all. Over the brightest scenes are clouds descending. The flame soars higher ere its deepest fall. The glorious day has too swift an ending. Night cometh after all. Or bloom or beauty, now in possession, is seen the shadow of the funeral pall. Through love and life and tearful intercession, death cometh after all. Anonymous poem upon the death of President Garfield, September 1988. While Lucretia was forced to watch the slow, cruel approach of death, Belle, it came suddenly, blindsided him, while he was caught up in another man's tragedy. Although he returned to Boston to be with Mabel, he continued to work feverishly on the induction balance, an old workspace in Charles Williams' machine shop. Just a week after Belle returned from Washington, Mabel suddenly went into labor. That day, she gave birth to a little boy, whom they named Edward. He was, Mabel would later write wistfully, a strong and healthy little fellow. As the baby struggled to breathe, however, it was apparent that the child was born too soon. After Belle had seen his son for the first time, he sent his parents in Washington a telegram with the wretching news. Little boy, born prematurely this afternoon, died in 3 hours. Mabel doing well, as can be expected. No need to come on. A. Graham Bell. Years later, Alec would admit to Mabel that he had yet to recover from death of their son and did not think he ever would. He was haunted by the belief that his selfishness had brought about their tragedy. Nothing will ever comfort me from the loss, he wrote, for I feel at heart that I was the cause. Engulfed in his own grief and mourning, Bell responded by plunging even more deeply into his quest for an answer to the president's suffering. After his son's funeral, he returned immediately to his work. He divides an attachment to the induction balance that he wanted Tainter to recreate in their laboratory in Washington so that it could be taken to the White House. Just 3 days after Edward's death, Tainter successfully tested the induction balance's new attachment for one of Garfield's surgeons, Frank Hamilton, in the Volta Laboratory in Washington, D.C. But with Garfield's condition deteriorating gravely and Bell stranded in Boston with his devastated family, unable to force the issue in person, his desperate, single-minded race to save the president came to an end. Bliss refused to let Tainter try the invention on Garfield. The president was too weak, he said. He would not risk exhaustion of another test. Unwilling to accept defeat, Bell redoubled his efforts from Boston, still believing that the president's life could be saved, or failing that intervention would prove to have lasting value for others. Perfecting the induction balance was a personal and scientific obligation, and he was not about to abandon it now, whatever the cost. Heartless science, he would write years later, seeks truth and truth alone, quite apart from any consequence that may arise. As a practical matter, however, Bell knew that whatever benefits the induction balance might have, they would come too late for the President Garfield. The clock had run out, and there was simply nothing more that Bell could do. Page 224, chapter After All, chapter 22, continued. This has been Tom Doody, middle-aged American living in New Jersey near the Lincoln Tunnel. If you were to visit my website, you would type Howdy Doody into Google. You'll find the correct spelling of the famous puppet. You then combine Tom Doody in a Google search for my site. Thank you for listening. Have a good day, good evening, or restful night's sleep.